This video is sponsored by my day job. All views and opinions are my own. Likes and subs are appreciated, but don't hit the notification button. Does anybody actually even do that? Seems annoying. Don't do that. Not being much of a trophy hunter means this isn't the kind of video I get to make often, but I ended up with a few more platinums than I expected this year. Without expecting any more this year, I think it's a good point to rank them. Let's get into it. Welcome back to JBG. Today we're taking the opportunity to rank our platinum trophies of 2023. Any more platinums this year is doubtful with the backlog of videos I got and the last classes to finish my degree, so I feel pretty safe putting out the list in September. Plus, this is an easy video format to put together after slacking for a little while. These rankings are completely subjective, of course, as some of them are kind of swan songs for games I've played for years. Bottom of the list doesn't mean a game I wouldn't recommend. At number 7, we have Scars Above on PS5. Scars Above is a sci-fi action Souls-like shooter from Madhead Games. You play as Kate Ward, a member of the Scars team investigating an anomaly that appeared over Earth one day. You're transported to an alien world, and your priority next to surviving is figuring out what the anomaly was and how you got there. It takes a different spin on the Souls-like genre, with the majority of the combat being range-based. Also, the leveling system is based on scientific knowledge you gain as opposed to experience from killing enemies. It also focuses on elemental effects of the guns, leading you to utilize weapons that your playstyle might neglect normally. It's much more approachable than the typical Souls-like. It even has a difficulty selection. Though I don't advise easy, even for new players it's a bit too easy to be rewarding for this kind of game. This is a AA game though, so expectations should fit the platform going into something like this. The platinum for this was the most direct one on the list. And even though I enjoyed it, and even played a few extra hours to get a glitch trophy, I still have to put it at the bottom of the list. It's just a very direct trophy list that leaves out most challenges that make a platinum satisfying. But again, that's not to say I wouldn't recommend this game if you keep your expectations in check. It has an interesting sci-fi story that kept me in it to the end. And it's on the shorter side, so it never really wears out its welcome. We did do a video on this right after we finished it, so I'll link it down in the comments in case you're curious of our overall thoughts on the game. I really wish I could put this one higher, but the competition gets pretty stiff going forward. At number 6, we have Terminator Resistance Enhanced version on the PS5. Terminator Resistance is a redemption arc for the developers Teyon after the disaster that was Rambo the video game. Terminator Resistance puts you in the shoes of Jacob Lee, a resistance soldier being the only survivor of his platoon as he fights his way back to the resistance. This is a first-person shooter set in the future war of the Terminator franchise, which was a great choice of setting. This is another AA game, and the main place this shows through is in the voice acting and the simple fetch quest side quest design. This is still a recommend though, because of what ACG refers to as a fun factor. The progression from the beginning of the game using traditional weapons and having to rely heavily on stealth, leading into the late game where you're taking on T-800s by the dozens, is so satisfying. Being a huge fan of the first two movies, this was a story setting I could appreciate since it was so respectful of the source material. The PS5 version also comes with Infiltrator mode, a DLC mini-campaign that was a really cool addition to the main game. This isn't going to go toe-to-toe with Call of Duty or anything, but it feels good for the world it's set in. Platinum for this is also mostly straightforward. You'll naturally unlock the majority of the trophies just playing through the campaign. But there may be a holdover one and a possible glitch trophy that will require some level replay. But with the autosaves being made at the beginning of each level, you essentially have a level select if you do need to go back for anything. This is another one we already did a video on, so I'll link it down in the description too if you want to check it out. While I definitely recommend this for Terminator fans, I don't recommend the Annihilation Line DLC. It just doesn't seem worth the cost. But the review video goes into more specifics on the recommendation. And here's the first game I ever got a platinum on multiple generations. At number 5, I have Skyrim on the PS5. Yes, I did buy Skyrim again. And this was easily the longest playthrough I've ever had. Skyrim is the 5th Elder Scrolls game by Bethesda Softworks. Probably Bethesda's most popular game overall, seeing as how many releases it's seen through the generations. You play as the Dragonborn, someone the legends say is destined to fight Alduin, the leader of the dragons returning to the world. It's a fantasy RPG that can be played first or third person, though the third person doesn't feel natural to me. Given the game is generally pretty clunky, I stick a lot to melee, and third person's rarely my go-to perspective to play. Though there is a lot of controversy over how they streamline the RPG elements among Elder Scrolls fans, I still get lost in this game world for hours on top of hours. In fact, this playthrough sat at almost 185 hours alone. I would have probably kept wandering around and finding more of the Anniversary Edition content, but I started getting such regular bugs and crashes at the point I was at, I just went for the last trophies to finish out the playthrough. The Anniversary Edition didn't seem like that much content at first, but I probably spent 20 hours alone organizing new gear around the new vampire house. On top of new weapons, houses, and quest lines, you also collect a ton of different pets with the Creation Club content, so it's like additional companions. Apparently there's quite a few spell add-ons here, but like I said, I mainly stick to melee, so I'm not sure how the majority of these feel compared to vanilla Skyrim. The last few versions of this game also added in all the DLCs, so you're getting quite a bit of added content here. I will say this is the first of the Swansong playthrough platinums though, as I never want to see another Dwemer ruin ever again. The platinum for Skyrim isn't really tough outside of one missable trophy for Daedric artifacts, and then having to go out of your way to get a bounty trophy. The vast majority of the trophies are story and side quest related, so it's a relatively easy platinum to get, but definitely in the upper tier of enjoyment since it's such a classic game at this point. This is an obvious recommend to anybody that likes fantasy RPGs, even if it does go a bit light on the RPG mechanics Bethesda was known for. This is the first of the long time coming platinums. At number 4, I have Fallout 3 on PS3. Fallout 3 is another Bethesda Softworks masterpiece in my opinion. Though not my favorite Fallout, I have to appreciate what they did with the franchise here. Fallout's based on a post-nuclear war era with a retro-futuristic aesthetic and a ton of dark humor. You play as a vault dweller from Vault 101, going out into the world for the first time at 19 to try and find your dad after he left the vault with no explanation. This is another first or third person optional perspective, but I have even more trouble with third person here since it's primarily shooting based, and the shooting isn't exactly great. This follows a lot closer with the older RPG mechanics with skills and attributes that change the dynamic of a first person shooter quite a bit. Full disclosure though, this game is an absolute mess on PS3. This playthrough was surprisingly my least glitchy playthrough, but after a decade of playing on this platform, I can't sugarcoat how horribly it's optimized for the PS3. I would say this was in the best era for Bethesda RPGs, with options on quest approach and choice and consequence decisions. The holes in how shallow a lot of these actually are shows through after so many playthroughs, but I could still appreciate a lot of the freedom given here, and the RPG focus on specific builds early to mid-game. This is another world you can just wander off and get lost in, but it's not as forgiving as Skyrim with level scaling. If you wander into the wrong area under-leveled, you will get smoked. But this focus on freedom of exploration and story approach, I'm not sure Bethesda ever reached again. As much as I love this game, and even ranking it here, my caveat would be to actually go play this on Xbox or PC. I decided to go back and get all the trophies I was missing after finishing another Fallout game, but unless you have some nostalgia for this game on PS3 like I do, I don't think most gamers will be as tolerant as I am for how this thing runs. I know this seems like cheating on a list of platinums. Rank it here by recommending not play it on the only platform that would actually give you a platinum, but it's my fucking list. I still highly recommend 100%ing this game on whatever your chosen platform is, but over a few years of playthroughs. I think some of the wonder of this game is going back later and seeing the alternative resolutions to the quest lines. I'm not sure this was a Swansong playthrough, but it felt like it was by the time I was finishing it up. This game has a very long history with me, but I think I've hit the point that unless I get an Xbox, I won't play through it again on old hardware. If the remastered leak is true, it could be a huge factor in finally picking up an Xbox though. I'd love to play a remaster on a modern console. This one I played on a whim, and it completely hit me out of left field. At number 3, I have Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on PS5. Rift Apart is a third-person shooter platformer from Insomniac Games. The game sees you jumping through different dimensions after a mishap with the Dimensionator that Clank meant to give Ratchet malfunctions and starts opening rifts between dimensions. The main story sees you swap between the series' namesake Ratchet and a new character Rivet for narrative reasons. The progression follows and gameplay doesn't really differ for the separate protagonists, and it works here. This is a series I slept on and just decided to play it since it was on PS Plus. Had I had known the series was developed by Insomniac, I might have checked it out a little bit sooner. There aren't a whole lot of PS5 exclusives that take full advantage of the PS5 DualSense. They did a great job here utilizing the functionality of the trigger half pull. I think Returnal is the only other game so far that has used this mechanic so well. Your half pull might be a zoom aim mechanic or a single shot, then a full pull has a different mechanic like a full auto or alternate burst. And there are a ton of different guns here, admittedly with varying levels of feeling different. I know playing it at this point, it should run really well, but even looking back on some old reviews, apparently this was optimized great right from launch. On top of this being a tight shooter and platformer, I was impressed with the storytelling itself. I guess I always kind of figured the series was more targeted towards kids, but there's definitely adult themes here, kind of like the older Pixar movies. And I definitely appreciated the story here. Granted, I didn't know any of the backstory, but this is a good entry point for the series since you're mainly dealing with alternate versions of known characters. I wouldn't quite say it's underrated, because I remember people talking about it quite a bit when it launched, but I don't hear too many people talking about it anymore. This platinum will likely require a guide to find some of the collectibles, but this is one of those games that I just enjoyed so much on the blind playthrough that I wanted to go back and find the rest of the stuff, just as an excuse to play some more. With the blind playthrough being pretty thorough, the guide portion really only took me about 2 hours after the story. With that, and needing to play through the first hour or so of New Game Plus for a weapon collection trophy and a single weapon challenge trophy to get, I almost wish there was more tied to New Game Plus. Not exactly a short game, I'd put my personal playtime around 17 or 18 hours, though I do tend towards the higher end of average playtimes. For anyone who picks up a PS5 though, I recommend this game all around, even if you aren't a trophy hunter. This is another game I have a long history with, and the upcoming sequel is probably my most anticipated game of the 9th generation. At number 2, I have Dragon's Dogma on PS4. Dragon's Dogma is an action RPG from Capcom, from the same director as the Devil May Cry games. You play as the Arisen, someone chosen by a dragon that eats their heart and ties them to the dragon in what's simply referred to as the cycle. There's a pretty complex story here dealing with the cycle and the theology behind it, but it isn't exactly told in the most coherent way, and doesn't translate too well to explain in depth here. Even though the story is really interesting once you figure it all out, that's not what made this game such a cult classic. What makes this game stand out is that it just doesn't play like any other game. You're accompanied through the game by pawns. These are character-created NPCs. You create your own and then hire other players' pawns while they can hire yours. As you level and your pawns level, you need to hire new pawns to keep up with your leveling, sending them back to their owners with the knowledge of the quest that you took them on. It's a really interesting take on an online mechanic that just isn't some PvP mode plugin. Then there's the combat. This stands out among every other action RPG out there. The main mechanic being you have to climb on larger enemies to access weak points to maximize damage. But there's even a ton to love here if you enjoy a mage class playthrough. The upper tier spells get pretty insane. All this leads to chaotic and cinematic combat encounters and just regular gameplay. From climbing a cyclops to hit its eye to clinging to a griffin as it takes flight. Ask almost anyone who loves this game, and the combat's going to be the top reason with almost every fan. The quirky nature of the storytelling and the weird quest design is loved by a lot of the fan base too. There's also an insane amount of gear, leading to a similar trend towards fashion over function like you see in a lot of Souls games. I was still finding new armor on New Game Plus 5 at over 240 hours on the PS4 version, just playing some specific parts for some game cap for a future video. And New Game Plus is actually a story mechanic. And it takes at least about 3 runs to hit the level cap required for a trophy without any grinding. There's some really obscure quest design structures that could easily lead you to not even knowing there was a missed quest. So a guide is probably the best way to go after finishing your first New Game Plus. For the Platinum, you also have to complete the original expansion, Bitter Black Isle. This is a very late game section that most people won't be able to handle until about your 3rd run, unless you cheat a lot of the mechanics. Then there's a speedrun option you need to complete. It's surprisingly fun to try once you played through the cycle a couple times. This is a pretty complex platinum overall, including needing multiple endings, endgame dungeons, and a few playthroughs just to reach the level cap without grinding or cheesing. Without a doubt, this was another swan song type playthrough, minus some game cap. I've been playing this since the original PS3 release, and even traded that in for the Dark Arisen expansion when that got a physical release. The graphics are admittedly dated, but it's the combat that we're here for. I would absolutely recommend this game to anybody that enjoys the action RPG genre, especially if you can appreciate experimental mechanics in a game that aren't necessarily explained all that well. And what's probably my swan song of all swan songs. At number 1, I have Fallout New Vegas on PS3. If you saw my Best Open Worlds video, you know this is easily my favorite game of all time. If you didn't see that video, well don't worry, it was one of my first, and we all know how those first videos go. New Vegas is an Obsidian Entertainment version of Bethesda's Fallout formula. There's so many impressive things about this game, even though it also runs horribly on the PS3, much like Fallout 3. One of the main impressive things about it, it was developed in 18 months. And at the time of release, it set the record for most recorded dialogue in a video game. It runs on Fallout 3's engine, and has some reused assets, but this is not even remotely a reskinned Fallout 3. You actually don't even play as a Vault Dweller in New Vegas, you play as a courier. After getting robbed for a package you were carrying and left for dead, you set out to find out who tried to kill you and why. The level of freedom set in Fallout 3 is expanded on to the extreme here. Just like Fallout 3, you could just beeline for late game main quest locations, if you can survive. This can cut a ton of questline content, but they built it to work this way, and it ties up any loose ends if you skip the other questlines. And deciding to specifically go for the Platinum here made me take some questline branches that I normally wouldn't even see. I'd say technically it's a bit easier to platinum than Fallout 3 because you don't have morality level trophies. You can use backup saves at specific points to get most of everything in a single playthrough. But I wouldn't ever recommend doing this, as the replayability of these two games, especially New Vegas, is completely wasted on trying to 100% it as fast as possible. This is another that I'd say is best done over years and multiple playthroughs. It's another that would take a ton of tolerance for Bethesda-type bugs and horrible optimization too. Obsidian added some quality of life upgrades to the Fallout 3 formula here, but playing through all the content and then the DLCs is almost guaranteed to start glitching your game by the time you're pushing the end of the main storyline. And then the Sunset Sarsaparilla Starcap quest can be a bit grindy if you haven't been looking for them since the start of the playthrough, and can highlight the performance issues you'll see late game if you're searching around forever late game looking for them. Another one that I could tolerate the PS3 version because we have so much history together, but wouldn't recommend on this platform for a playthrough. In the end, I just can't see going back to this game on PS3 anytime soon, after so many years, so many different starts, and so many different playthroughs. Even more than the leaked Oblivion and Fallout 3 remasters, playing New Vegas on a current-gen platform is the biggest drive for considering picking up an Xbox finally. But whatever your platform, this is still a game I would recommend everybody give a chance at least once, even if you don't want 100% it. These are just the platinums I ended up picking up in 2023 so far, and some are among my favorite games ever made. Obviously, if I've been playing some of these for over a decade now. Let me know down in the comments if you played through these, and if you thought they were actually worthy of the effort to platinum. Until next time.
What? Toodaloo, motherfucker. Hey.